percentage of female STEM graduates is increasing, women are less likely to integrate into the labour market and to occupy higher leadership roles. According to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2023, women account for only 29.2%, so less than 30% of all workers in STEM. The percentage of women working in artificial intelligence has increased only 4% since 2016. To shine a spotlight on the fact that, despite these statistics, women have made remarkable contributions to creative technology, King's Culture and the Global Institute for Women's Leadership are welcoming leading artists whose work has inspired and informed pioneering new technologies as we mark the launch of the new GIWL Illuminating Innovation exhibition. This is an exhibition that showcases groundbreaking digital creativity by women and features both legacy artworks and newly commissioned pieces that highlight women's role in shaping the technologies of tomorrow. Tonight, we are going to get to have a conversation with two of the women who feature in the exhibition, as well as the exhibition's curator. So we will be talking about their work, talking about the exhibition, and talking about the broader issues around women in the creative technology sector. Let me firstly introduce to you Tomiko, who is here. Tomiko Thiel is a visual artist who pushes the boundaries of technology with interactive 3D virtual worlds and AI. She not only collaborated with Steven Spielberg on the first metaverse for children, but was also the lead product designer of the first AI supercomputer in the 1980s, leaving an indelible mark on computer design. Joining me here is Noni de la Peña, who has been dubbed the godmother of virtual reality, whose revolutionary work, Hunger in LA, spearheaded the world of virtual reality documentaries. Her creation played a pivotal role in the birth of the Oculus Rift headset, which was later acquired by Facebook. And of course, there is Professor Sarah Atkinson, who is no stranger to many in this room. She is the Professor of Screen Media at King's College here in London and the Globe Project lead and curator. And so it makes perfect sense to start with Sarah. Sarah, you're our sort of fearless leader on this project, so can you tell us about the GIWL Illuminating Innovation exhibition? How did it come about? What was the inspiration for it? And what should people expect to see and be challenged by?
Okay, thank you, Julia. So GIWL Illuminating Innovation opens tomorrow on International Women's Day. It's across multiple sites here on the Strand Aldwych, so in the Bush House Arcade, which is opposite this building, on the Strand Aldwych in the physical location itself, in our Curiosity Cabinet at 171 The Strand, which is just down the road there, and also there'll be a piece in St Mary le Strand Church. So it really is a GIWL takeover of the space, and it will be open until the 20th of April, and it features both Tomiko and Noni, but there's also 4 brand new commissions, and our artists are in the audience tonight, and you'll be able to speak to them afterwards. That's work that's never been seen before, and there's lots of other legacy pieces from artists, both in the arcade and in the Curiosity Cabinet, and it's really showcasing cutting-edge creativity at the absolute cutting edges of technology, immersive technologies such as augmented reality and virtual reality. There's also a virtual reality showcase, which is bringing together work from women over the past 3 years. So yeah, it's really celebrating, foregrounding and illuminating all of that digital creativity that these wonderful women have been involved with. So it came about, in terms of the next part of the question, through a research project that I began in 2016, and that involved interviewing with my collaborator at the University of Southern California, Vicky Callahan, 140 women, non-binary and trans creatives working in the emergent media, nascent media sectors, to hear about their lived experiences, what it's like to work within those industries and those sectors, and to uncover and discover some of the hidden histories of discoveries that we've not heard about. So there's a kind of a key cycle that we really wanted to interrogate within the work, and that's when there's a new emergent technology, there is an open and experimental space available, and lots of people engage within that space. That's happened since the birth of film, through to animation, to computer coding. All of those innovations, when they begin, are very open and inclusive spaces. But as soon as they're commercialized, as soon as they're professionalized, that's when those individuals are pushed out, and that's when investment comes in, and it tends to go to a very narrow demographic. So this cycle of innovation has continued. We've seen it throughout all of immersive technology in the 90s when virtual reality first came about, right until now. So this project is really about intervening in that moment and really kind of highlighting and celebrating those who are there at the beginning.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sarah, you've got a book coming out later in the year, which we all have to put on our reading lists, Mixed Realities, Gender and Emergent Media. You've spoken about how women get crowded out when technology moves towards the commercialisation stage, and we're celebrating the creativity and contribution of women who did experience some of that crowding out, but whose contributions should still be honoured. What other issues for women would you say are in the sector?
Yeah, I mean, the book itself, this is part of the reason why this exhibition has come about. It doesn't actually come out until spring 25, and that's the kind of the painful, grinding slowness of academic publishing, unfortunately, where it takes a long time for work to actually get out into the world because of peer review, because of publishing processes. So really this exhibition was my impatience and my wanting to get those stories out, which are so urgent. So I interviewed both, well, I interviewed Tomiko, my collaborator Vicky interviewed you, Nonny, and there were such privileged, wonderful conversations that I was having just on my own with you and the many others, and it was at that moment it really struck me that these should be out there for everyone to hear, and I'm hoping we can restage those conversations this evening.
Thank you. I think the world is built by impatient women, so thank you for being an impatient woman. Tomiko, we've said to each other probably 5 times in the last hour, don't forget the T-shirt. You've got the T-shirt, haven't you?
I've got the T-shirt.
Okay, can you tell us the story of this T-shirt?
This T-shirt, oops. There we go. We'll see if this works out. So this T-shirt is probably the only T-shirt that was the nucleus for the design of a supercomputer. And since it was the first AI supercomputer, it has also a little bit extra role. And so basically, I'll try and make this short. Basically, I'll sit down. In the early mid-'80s, I was asked by this guy, Danny Hillis, who was at the MIT AI lab, if I would join his startup Thinking Machines to do the product design of a supercomputer, and it was going to be the first AI commercial supercomputer, the connection machine. And to cut a very long story very short, at some point, of course, every company, every startup needs a T-shirt. So this was the first T-shirt that was designed for the company. And when it came time to actually build the physical machine, at some point, we all realized that this was the best depiction of how the machine actually functioned. So you see this rigid box structure that represented the actual wired connections of the 12-dimensional Boolean incube, which was the internal network between the processors. But you see that there's these fuzzy balls that are connected outside of that structure, and those are the software connections, the data structure connections, that were independent of this hardware structure. So really, if you, I don't know if Sarah's going to click any images up there, but I think at some point she'll show a photograph of the connection machine, which is really a cube of cubes with all these glowing lights. And that's how the world's first AI supercomputer became designed after a T-shirt. This is definitely my most saleable artwork. It's cheap.
Love it, love it. And this ended up having a particular impact on Steve Jobs, her name known globally, known around the world. Many people would be carrying products that he inspired, Apple products, and we've all, seen the various movies. Can you tell us about that impact?
Yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't the T-shirt; it was the machine itself. But when the connection machine came out, I mean, it really is about as tall as I am, matte black with 4,096 blinking red lights on it from the inside of the machine. A girlfriend of mine, Joanna Hoffman, was Steve Jobs' right hand, as you will see in some films. And she told me years later that when Steve Jobs saw the first photographs of the machine, he said, "I want that designer to design the next computer that I'm starting to build right now in my company Next." He had been thrown out of Apple and had started this Next company. And Joanna, bless her heart, really did not have an email for me. I was in Germany. People didn't have emails at that point in 1986. And so, unfortunately, I only heard this story years later, and she had to tell Steve Jobs, "I'm really sorry, I don't have any contact information." She's off in Germany becoming an art student. So, but if you do look at the Next cube, it was a perfect black cube. That's what came out then a couple years later. And if you look at Steve Jobs' products before that and after that, you'll see that that marked a sea change in the aesthetic of all of his products. They used to be kind of cuddly friendly, and after that, they're what I like to call the technological sublime. And that's the design that attracts us all to Apple products. And when I told the Museum of Modern Art this story 30 years later, when they were finally interested in including one in their connection, of course, that's what really got the machine into that. Besides the fact that it was also in 1989 the fastest computer in the world, and the fact that all of the technology essentially flowed into Google AI, which, as you might know, has produced a little bit of change in our world as well. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Okay, so if the history was there fairly and clearly for all of us to see, wouldn't all of these devices have your name on them somewhere?
No, there's a lot of other people's names that need to go on it too, but I was really shocked when I found out that, that my design really had influenced Steve Jobs. That was certainly an interesting mark on my life up to that point.
It's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing it with us, and it says a lot about your creativity, women's creativity. Nonny, let me turn to you now, and you have, or will have, in the Curiosity Cabinet as part of the exhibition, interesting headset technology, and it relates to the Hunger in LA piece that you did. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the reason why she said or will be is because I think Customs doesn't know what to make of it. And they won't let my headsets out of Customs. I'm only hoping they're not going to arrive completely unduct taped and torn apart. But actually, they're 3D printed. So I actually had my first experience in a walk-around VR experience in a lab in Barcelona. Somebody who's also used to be based here, Mel Slater, and his partner Maria Sanchez Vives, had this extraordinary experience about, why does bar fights break out? Do people intervene? Does the bystander effect real? And after I experienced that first walk-around experience, I was like, I can't put my audience out there. They have to be in here with me. So I weaseled my way into a lab at USC, University of Southern California. I'd been working with a research fellow in the journalism school, and I wanted to do something about the fact that people were going hungry, that food banks were running out of food, and I can't make you feel hungry, but if I could put you on scene, I could make you understand what it means for people. And I had this young intern, and she happened to record a day where a man with diabetes waiting in a long line for food didn't get food in time, his blood sugar dropped too low, and he collapsed. And then somebody tries to steal food, there's all this chaos. So I built this piece where you were there next to this unfolding crazy scene. But at the USC lab, we only had this one headset called the Wide 5, which Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives were using in Barcelona. And this piece ended up getting into this 2012 Sundance Film Festival. And the head of the USC lab was like, that's $50,000 a headset, that is going nowhere. And there was a kid kicking around the lab who had been buying these headsets up, any headset he could off at bankruptcy sales and making all this hardware stuff. We needed headsets to go to Sundance. And so began this endeavor to start building these things. We had these like lenses from this company that had gone out of business that NASA had made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have these photographs of me with this guy who's got a big fat head and I have a really skinny head. And you got to think about where the lens is going to go. They're going to work for both people, right? So anyway, we show up at Sundance with this incredible, big, duct-taped, massive thing with this light structure, this $100,000 tracking system. And I certainly followed in Palmer's footsteps and started buying stuff off bankruptcy sales too. That kid was Palmer Luckey. He came with us to Sundance. He slept on my hotel room couch. He drove the van for us. He drove the van back across. He wasn't even old enough to drink in America, but 9 months later, he started Oculus Rift. That company got bought for $3 billion from Meta. So we started out with Palmer, but then when Palmer made the first Oculus, it sat you down in a chair. I wanted that freedom of movement and continued to 3D print headsets for some years to come.
And so that is an incredible story at so many levels. I mean, virtual reality in 2012 being used to tell a social impact, hearts and minds story to give people the experience of what it's like to be on the scene as someone collapses from diabetes because they haven't reached the queue at the food bank quickly enough. They're in that degree of food poverty and exclusion. Your creativity in duct taping a headset together and it then becoming a $3 billion company. I mean, that is such a remarkable story. I mean, when you look back on it now, I mean, bring the gender element out a little bit for us. How do you see it as a gender story?
So you can imagine how quickly that everything closed ranks. You can imagine. It wasn't really a history that if I hadn't been as somebody in that world called me tenacious, may not be as well told. But I still continue to make headsets for a while. How do you democratize and how do you make things inclusive? And there was still space for all that at that point. So I think, though, when you would try to come into these spaces, and I'm sure there's lots of women in this room who would agree with me, that you would face a monoculture of who you were trying to pitch to, who you were trying to ask to include you. I remember like one guy, like some new gear came in and I was really excited about it, and only one guy turned around and said, "Hey, Donnie, did you see this?" Like all the other guys closed ranks, right? So it's interesting how when I walked into a room to study some better coding, and there was 35 guys, and I was the only woman at USC, where I wanted to do my PhD, how it takes your breath away. So why? Why does it take your breath away? Like, what is it about walking in a room like that that makes it difficult? But you have to just be tenacious, and I guess that's where we are today, where things are shifting, and there's some amazing artists who have all been, whatever that uphill battle might have been, have persevered.
Impatient women, tenacious
yeah,
women.
Absolutely.
There's a theme.
Yeah, tenacious and impatient, definitely.
There's a theme. Coming back to you, Tomiko, and your work with the Connection Machine, can you tell us about the Steven Spielberg collaboration?
Oh, that was completely separate. So I really did leave the company Thinking Machines in 1985 and went over to Europe and landed in Munich and ended up studying art there. and then finished up and then ended up in 1994 back in San Francisco, and was looking for work, and a friend of mine said, oh, well, there's friends of mine who have started a new company doing virtual reality, and you know, the term virtual reality has a very broad span, and I basically use it to mean interactive, real-time 3D computer graphics. So the computer has to be rendering 3D objects in real time as you're walking around or interacting with it. And this is technology that used to require machines that cost $100,000, $200,000 or more dollars for one machine. And in this time frame, 92, 94, it became possible to run this technology on high-end PCs, so $5,000 PCs. And so this company, Worlds Incorporated, had started to do this technology, and it could also go on the internet. So you could do virtual worlds on the internet. I think a lot of people or your children might be active in these virtual worlds on the internet playing games, and the whole games evolved out of that, these 3D games. But basically, this was really one of the first years that such companies existed, and there was a project that Steven Spielberg had thought up in his role as chairman of the Starbright Foundation, a foundation in Hollywood that was trying to bring together the film industry, the game industry, high-tech industry, to create products that would help chronically and seriously ill children either understand more about their sicknesses or somehow be able to transcend them and live a more full life. So Steven Spielberg's idea was to use this new technology of 3D virtual worlds on the internet to bring children in hospital rooms around the country into one virtual world where they could meet with each other and play with each other. And at that point in 1994, there weren't a lot of people who had both a technological background and a strong artistic background. And basically, my track record with the Connection machine was basically my in for getting that job. So I was producer and creative director. We did have a virtual world running for from 74 to 1994 to 1997 on 5 different children's hospitals worldwide, and this really was the first 3D metaverse where the kids could join in this world as avatars. They would run around looking for E.T., who of course was Steven Spielberg's avatar, and would be able to talk and play together in a way that they couldn't in real life because they were fastened to their hospital beds. So that was my introduction to that sort of technology, but it did not run on headsets. I mean, Noni is talking about the horrible big kludgy headsets in 2012, and we're talking 1994. So, the doctor said, listen, these kids get nauseous anyway from their medications. You're not going to put something on their heads that's going to make them even more nauseous within a couple of minutes. So everything was running on monitors and was powered with mouse and keyboard, like a lot of 3D games still are. And I took this, but that meant, of course, that it was not just one person in this virtual world, that there could be a small group of kids sitting around a monitor, sitting around a PlayStation in a hospital, a playroom, and sharing the experience together, which of course was a very important part of the whole experience. So when I started doing my own virtual reality works, I continued this line of thought that I wanted to let a lot of people be able to see it simultaneously, be able to watch it together. So really, the 3 works that I produced over the next 15 years, I was always showing as large wall-sized projections, like 9 feet by 12 feet, with a very simple joystick. So anyone, if you think about people in wheelchairs, they can operate motorized wheelchairs by just pushing on a joystick, which means that if they can do that in real space, you can do that with a real joystick in my virtual space. So the piece that I'm showing in this exhibit is the second piece that I did with this technology. I've given special permission to show it on a small monitor instead of on a wall size, because otherwise it'd be taking up a lot of room. But it's that technology. This piece was from 2006. The technology is essentially from the late 90s, and it is 2D, not a stereo projection like in a headset. On the other hand, like I say, you can watch it together as a group and kibbutz about where you should go and what you should do.
And can you just describe the content of it a little bit more to us?
Okay, that's a little bit difficult too. It's called The Travels of Mariko Polo, which is specifically a play on the travels of Marco Polo. But what I've done is I've taken the viewpoint of a time-traveling Japanese woman artist who was born somewhere between the 12th and the 21st centuries. The 12th century, of course, is when Marco Polo traveled to Asia. And so my conceit is that she had a map of Venice from his time, which I actually have, reproduction of it. And then some images that came into Japan during the time when the country was closed, when there was a whole genre in Japan of artists who imagined the exotic and unreachable West. And so in my piece, there's that viewpoint of trying to imagine a people, a race, if you will, a type of people, a culture, and a land which you know you'll never be able to visit because you could only leave Japan on pain of death, literally. And how do you then imagine an entire foreign culture just on the basis of some images and some maps? So this is the fantasy that I take you through. I collide, if you will, Christian, especially Byzantine iconography and Buddhist iconography. The point of collision is Venice, because in Japan there's this idea of there's a paradise floating in the western seas, and that sure sounds like Venice to me. So you arrive at Venice and encounter desolate islands that, however, lead you into various heavens and various hells deriving from, like I said, Buddhist iconography and also Dante's concepts of various levels of heavens and hells.
Wow, if that hasn't enticed you to come to the exhibition, I don't know what possibly could. That sounds absolutely amazing.
Really, really quick addenda. You have to find your way yourself through the world with the joystick. If you just sit there and watch, nothing will happen. So.
Okay, so it's enticing and a little bit of a challenge, but I think in terms of manipulating the joystick, if you're not confident yourself, if you bring a child, they'll fix that for you. So yes, the exhibition. Noni, I'm going to come back to you now and ask you about a term that you coined, immersive journalism. Can you tell us what that means and what drew you to immersive journalism? What is it about?
So my background was pretty traditional. I was a correspondent for Newsweek back when there was a print magazine that used to arrive in the mail once a week. But working on cover stories like 24 Hours Crack, I was trying to give you what Martha Gellhorn called the view from the ground. How do you write about these things and tell people in a way that gave them the view of what was going on? And again, with hunger, as I mentioned, the idea was, how do I give you the view from the ground about people going hungry? But the idea for immersive journalism predated that piece. I'd worked with another digital artist who's in our show, Peggy Weil, I believe is here tonight, on a piece on a virtual Guantanamo Bay prison in Second Life. There was Gitmo off limits to most citizens and press. We wanted to make a accessible, albeit virtual version. And after we made that piece, and it got so many people came from all over the place to see it, we were very accurate, we were careful. I had footage from a documentary I'd worked on that showed how detainees were being brought to the prison and treated in the prison. That got pulled off out of the public's eye by the Department of Defense. I use this as kind of a repository of that imagery. And after that piece was made, I remember thinking, my goodness, this is really great use of journalism. It can be used, virtual reality can be used for all kinds of journalism. We made a secondary piece with Mel Slater in Barcelona about detainees being put in stress positions. And out of that piece, we published an article on the first-person experience of the news, immersive journalism, in the MIT journal Presence. I believe it's still the second most downloaded article in the history of the journal. That's during that period of time is when I began to work on hunger. And then, hunger, as this nature of immersive journalism, ended up inspiring a lot of different careers. I think you'll see, there might be a photograph up there, but it's not going to work. I think you have to go poke that machine manually, make it behave. Where's your whip? So, but people like the film director Alejandro González Iñárritu, you might know him as the director of Birdman and Revenant, etc. He came and tried hunger, and then he made a piece called Carne Reina, if anybody knows about that piece. I could go on for the number of people who then went through that piece. Oh, that's hunger. Go back one. If you go back one, please. Can you? There you go. Oh, there you go. So you can see Alejandro's in the goggles there. And the thing about Hunger in LA, that's the seizure victim who collapsed. By the way, these characters were all either bought on the internet or donated, and I had to beg and borrow anything I could to help make this thing. But it was astonishing how people, by the way, you can see it yourself. It's here, which is also astonishing that something made in 2010 is still, you can play it, right? That's kind of crazy. But you can see Alejandro's very careful not to step on the seizure victim. And that was a really surprising thing for me to learn, was just how much people's bodies were in there. When we did the detainee piece, we asked people to sit in a chair, and they had their hands behind their back, just like this. We asked them, and they were wearing a breathing strap. And they would see in a virtual mirror a detainee hunched over in a stress position. I think I'm echoing a little bit. Hunched over in a stress position. And after they took the goggles off, we said, what was your body like? And everybody reported that they were hunched over in a stress position when they were sitting upright in their chairs. So that gives you the idea of the power of when you visualize yourself in these different ways through the goggles, how much it informs even how you think of where your body is, which is why also you get this idea for the nausea, because a lot of people still think it's film, and it's not film. And what they do is they push the camera, right? You're sitting there in a chair, and the camera starts moving, and your eyes are going, I'm moving, and your inner ear says, you're not going anywhere. And I found that disconnect is one of the key reasons why people get nauseous inside of goggles. Some of the latency issues is a problem too, but it's also the design. And that's a very simple design factor, I think.
And are you surprised, given the power of it, are you surprised that immersive journalism isn't more used? It would seem to me that we would see it more routinely to try and tell us some of the biggest stories of our age.
So I think that we're seeing this revolutionary moment now, right? Because now that Apple's gotten in the game, I think everybody's kind of like, I guess there really is this three-dimensional space that is going to be very important for the way that content is conceived, experienced, and distributed. So this three-dimensional space is ripe for journalism. And by the way, in that picture, you can see the headset that's in customs anyway. That hopefully will come back still looking like that, not torn apart. I think we're at a really, when we just walk by a big, huge bus stop queue and somebody, there's a big poster of, I was trained in virtual reality, this, somebody in a construction site. This will permeate. And it's a combination of things. You can use your phone to make three-dimensional content in minutes. If you use an app like Polycam or Scaniverse, you literally can just take pictures. You can use video to make something called a Gaussian splat. Again, three-dimensional in minutes. You can use AI technologies to start to spit things out in 3 dimensions and game objects in 3 dimensions, things that used to take forever to do. It's really speeding up right now. So to me, the question is not, is this going to be used for journalism? Or is it a problem that people are the camera and they look where they want to look? No. The question is, when people are going to be able to capture that easily, are we going to let people step over the bodies when there's a bomb explosion? How do we ethically start to think about what is going to be the impact of this content? How do we tell the truth without traumatizing people, and yet still convey these very, very important stories?
Fascinating.
Can I
Yes, of
cut
course.
in a little bit? There have actually been a lot of sort of semi-immersive journalism in the sense of 360-degree videos that you can view in helmets. And there was a wave of that. I'm trying to remember exactly when, but probably 2017, 2018. And not with the three-dimensional rendering that Noni uses, but literally just surrounding you with a static image or a video image on a cylindrical screen. So, and I think the New York Times for a while was bringing out regular installments of this. So I think that the distribution and getting people to actually, take the trouble of looking at them is still a big step. That it was a big step back in 2017-18 when this was coming out regularly in the New York Times. They're not doing that anymore. There's still the question of, how do you bring the content to people in a way that they actually take the trouble.
But they are still doing it, and they're doing it increasingly, and they're hiring more people now. But what they realized was the same problem of trying to take what is a three-dimensional space and flatten it into a sphere, and where the problems from that come from. So they're very deep into making spatial content. I mean, Apple doesn't want to call it virtual augmented reality. They call it spatial computing, but it's the same thing. But the question is spatial. That's, your world is not flat.
No.
The world is not flat. And what happened with the New York Times is the $3 billion deal was announced. People were like, we got to get into this, but the lowest hanging fruit was just to use spherical camera shooting. If you remember, Nokia had a camera too, that tanked. That was going to be their next big thing, was this 360 video camera. But if any of you who say, oh, they'll know how to do a joystick, well, what are you using a joystick for? To move through three-dimensional space. And any younger audiences who are now becoming more mature, they're very accustomed to moving through 3D space, having a virtual representation of themselves, to participate in a three-dimensional world. And frankly, that really is the direction we're going, and it's really just now a time for us to start thinking about how do you design for the fact that somebody could be looking over here and you want them, the action to be over here. I mean, and be able to move through it and be able to, think about the way that we're going to utilize AI technologies to help us. I've got a crazy workflow right now where I bring stuff into Midjourney, which is lets you generate a image. Then I bring that image into Runway AI, which then generates a video. Then I bring that into Stable Diffusion, and I'm using a plugin to then each frame, I generate a 3D model. It's kind of like Play-Doh being extruded. Then I have to bring it into Blender and hack it off. But that is amazing, because I can do that in a few hours, or like 6 hours, whereas before that would take me 6 weeks. So, there's still a little bit of a complication in working with AI, but it is happening very, very fast.
Obviously, the technology piece is not my core skill, but I mean, and you've raised some of the ethical issues, and they're certainly ones that need some deep thinking. But in a world where empathy can be in far shorter supply than we actually need it to be, the power of this immersive journalism to get people to experience the world in a different way. I'm thinking of things like you could experience what it's like to be in a major storm event in a low-lying Pacific island to help you really understand something more about the challenge of climate change than potentially you do sitting here in London. That, and the thing you did with hunger, obviously there are all sorts of social issues that you could use the technology to give people a deeper understanding, potentially, of things like homelessness and those social problems that if we felt more connection to and more empathy in relation to, perhaps there would be more political will to resolve them. Does that sound right?
So having built the climate change piece on Greenland melting, where we did photogrammetry, which means we made photoreal spaces of a NASA research mission that included their boats, their planes, going underwater to show how it was the warming currents. They were looking at, is warming currents causing the glaciers to melt more rapidly because the temperatures above didn't account for the incredible melt. And one of the things we were doing was putting you in the back of the plane while one of the researchers is dropping a thermometer down back of the plane, like next to the toilet, like from an airplane. Now, anybody in this room, anybody can imagine dropping a thermometer down the toilet of an airplane, right? You're always like, oh, what happens next? So like, that demystifies the science. And you're like, oh, they aren't making this data up. I could be collecting that data. And that piece, we did a number of studies around it and found that people found we did it just a regular video, we did it with 360 video, and then we did it fully immersive, right? We just made different versions of it. And by far, the fully immersive one was the most effective and made people consider. I mean, I've done stuff on Syrian refugees, LGBTQ homelessness, Lyme disease, the incarceration of Japanese Americans in the United States during World War II. I mean, I've gone on to make so many pieces and since hunger. And I have to say that study after study, even around abortion, there's a hot topic in America. And we did a piece which, using real audio, put you on scene in front of healthcare clinics, and you're being yelled at, because we can use humans, like the ABBA show, right? To yell at you as you try to get in the door of the space, the way real women are yelled at. It's all real audio. And we took that into some very conservative areas. And it wasn't like we said, okay, change your view about abortion, but what everybody agreed on was that women should not be treated that way when they're going into these clinics. We found a ground that was available to everybody, that otherwise was very difficult to convey unless you were there being screamed at and being called a whore and told to shut your legs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in my career, I found these pieces to be incredibly effective, and I think that you know, there's so many great stories out there to be told, and it's why I took this new position after running my company for a decade, doing these, to start a new center at Arizona State University on narrative and emerging media to kind of bring in, not kind of, we are bringing in much more diverse creators, many of whom are doing their own forms of nonfiction. My student Cameron Christopoulos did a piece called Body of Mine on the trans experience, and he ended up winning the top jury prize at South by Southwest, Games for Change, ended up at the Venice Film Festival, and he just won the Producers Guild of America Award for Innovation, where he wore this incredibly beautiful blue gown, and Margot Robbie told him he was the best dressed person in the room. So,
love that.
So can I,
yes, of
yeah,
course.
if I can interject something. So the thing is that the technology is there to do amazing things. It's clear that it really does provide an impact, but we still sit here and say, well, you can do the festival circuit, and then what?
Mm.
And how do you get any sort of, you know, return on investment if you're not able to get it fully funded? Is it all coming out of your pocket? So there's still the problem of how then, you know, what's the distribution system? How do people actually come to look at these pieces? And then the other portion, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed with the things that are happening in the world right now, where I can vividly imagine them without being in VR, but there's so much happening simultaneously that I feel like I also can't do anything. So the other question is how, how can we, I mean,
But you can imagine solutions.
Yes.
And you can be in a solution that is unimaginable otherwise. In fact, I'm working with an Israeli peace activist on trying to imagine a post-Palestinian post-Gaza war Palestine. And it's his relationship with Palestinians and designing these ideas that right now seem incomprehensible to us. Perhaps we can provide ways for people to actually visualize the kind of change that they can make.
So it can't be just, it's really easy to do dystopia. It's really easy to say, oh, this is really horrible. What's really difficult and what we really need now is, this is really horrible, and this is how we hope to change it. And this is how you can get involved in changing it. And those, I mean, without hope, you die anyway, right? So I see it not as a technological problem at this point, but as a question of how do you orient those resources and those technological abilities in ways that actually make change. And I'm not good at that sort of thing. I hate committees and discussions, but I've been invited to participate in some workshops this year where people are saying, and we're going to try and figure out how we can go beyond the imagining and the depiction to actually do something. And I'm hoping to find some impetus there, because I think that's what's really missing right now.
I'm going to come out for some audience questions very shortly, but I'm going to do a sweep. Sarah, I'll actually start with you. The statistics I gave at the start, just reflecting back to those and the discussion we've just had, I mean, who owns, shapes, resources, builds, popularises, distributes the kinds of creative technologies that we've talked about in this discussion will have profound implications for what it does and its impact in the world. If we're just drawing a line today and looking at who is in the space, we'd say that is going to be disproportionately men. I mean,
Absolutely.
60, 70, maybe even, depending on what levels we're talking about, maybe more male than that. What do we need to do to change that picture?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an absolute lack of visibility, of representation at, exec board levels in tech companies, in VC capital funding, in public funding. There's a real lack of gender diversity there for who's leading those projects. And what we can see from today, these are just two, incredible backstories that we've heard from these women. There are many, many more. There isn't an absence of women leadership in this sector. There's an abundance, but it's hidden, it's covered, it's sidelined. And so what needs to be done is that needs to be elevated, brought forth, and recognised. And yeah, gender equality should be across all of those different areas of funding and opportunity.
And Noni, what would you say?
So it's always trying to figure out the workarounds, right? And what is our participation in that? I've been, one of the things without distribution, friction. We've been working in something called WebXR. I've tried to make a platform. It's very much beta. You can go to try.reach.love, and you can start making immersive content that you can look at a computer, a phone, or a headset. And the point of that was, once again, how do you go around these closed-walled systems, and you can publish it like a YouTube video. So that to me is one, I'm always trying to figure out, how do I get around this wall that's always in front of us? And then it became starting the center so I can support and help other artists. I think the studies are pretty clear that if a woman is in the decision-making group, that you'll see, there's so much study after study, that if that happens, in typically 50% of the hires, or 35% of the hires will be women, if a woman's helping choose, make the decision. But if it's an all-men group, then the women who are hired or funded, et cetera, drops considerably. So we definitely have to elevate women into those decision-making places as well. And, I ask you all to help us figure out how to do that too.
Thank you. And what would you say?
Yeah, who gets the airspace? Well, billionaires get the airspace, and
actual space.
It's like, can you send them to Mars and leave them there, please, and then let the rest of us get on with life on Earth? And it's. I always say that if you. I even have heard the phrase not too long ago. Where's all the women in VR? And the thing is that I think the survey that I was reading this phrase in, it was looking exclusively at the hardware developments. And what's the big news right now in VR? Is it that someone's created an amazing piece? No, it's that there's yet another amazing, really expensive helmet. So it's the hardware that's getting the airspace. It's the companies that develop the hardware that get the airspace. And, what are the films that get the airspace? Well, frankly, it's the ones that bring in like millions and millions of dollars. And VR, by its nature, a film, you can have one film in a huge theater, and so a lot of people see that one showing. VR, by its nature, is a very sort of one-on-one experience. So again, I'm getting back to the distribution issue. There's wonderful, wonderful content coming out of the VR festivals. There's a selection from the Venice VR Festival that's part of the GLOW exhibit. But after they do the festival circuit, who sees them? Who knows about them? The museums, the art museums, don't have really the capacity to have someone wipe the sweat from the previous person off the headset before giving it to you, et cetera, et cetera. So there is amazing work being done, but that doesn't get out beyond the small festival circuits. So if we want to change that, then we're talking about a big shift in a lot of different systems, because the ones who get the automatic attention are the ones who bring out really expensive hardware.
Mm. Can I just say thank you to this exhibit for trying to promote this and shift the history. So I'm really so grateful to be invited here to see if the conversation here and the artists who are represented and are going to be in the book, really grateful for the people who try to help the dialogue be a little bit more accurate. So thank you, Sarah.
Bravo, Sarah.
Bravo, Sarah. And that is the most perfect segue of all time. So, Sarah, tomorrow I'm meandering around the Strand. I've had a cup of coffee. I'm ready to do something. What do I do?
Well, you can come and see Hunger in LA in the Strand space. You can also see our VR program opens tomorrow, where we have 12 different VR experiences that you can book in to watch. If you've not experienced VR before, this is a brilliant place to start. There's some phenomenal projects in there, many along the lines of which we've been discussing this evening. You can wander along to the Curiosity Cabinet and hopefully see the headsets and other technologies in there. The first AR glasses created by Rebecca Allen, who also has a piece in the gallery. Some of you may know Rebecca Allen. She's a prolific digital artist, but her first piece is in there, which is the first 3D animation of a female figure. There's Peggy Wile's work in there too, which is called Lip Sync, which is the first generated CGI, which is a precursor to today's deep fakes. There's the first VR film made by Nicole Stenger in the cabinet. There's early haptic experimentations from Margaret Minsky. Yeah, there's loads to see. And then you can also see our 4 wonderful new commissions who are in the audience and who'll be at the back of the room to chat with you. Violetta, do you want to wave? I was going to have an image, but I can't change this. I've got Violetta, Beck, Yali and Lisa have all got works, and those are spilling out onto the Strand in augmented reality. So if you take your mobile device along, scan the wonderful plinths that you'll see in the Strand Aldwych space. We've got neon green numbers on, you can't miss them. There's also a big portrait outside of the Bush House Gallery that you can scan. So yeah, wonderful. There's so much to see. I urge you all to go. And there's also a program of events that's being published on the website. If you search GLOW Illuminating Innovation, there's panels, artist talks, all the way up until the 20th of April.
And are there animals?
Animals.
As in?
There's animals, yeah. Violetta's robotic animals are running all around the Strand that you can see through your phone. So go and chase them. There's llamas.
How do you see a running around the Strand animal?
So you take your mobile phone and you go to the Bush House arcade, and there's a portrait picture outside which has got the animals depicted, and you hold your phone up, scan the QR code, and they'll start to leap out all around you.
Okay, particularly interested in the animals. Thank you for that. Lots to see, lots to think about. But over to you now for some quick questions. Is anybody? Yes, please. A microphone's going to be brought to you. And if you could just say your name, please.
Hi there, everyone. My name's Tamsin. I work here at King's College London. Thank you for that. That was really interesting. And I sort of wanted to reflect on what you've all talked about this sort of like invisibilisation of women in tech. But you also seem to touch on the invisibilisation of the role of the arts and creativity in this space. So I wondered if you could reflect on what I think many of us in this room perceive as a sort of crisis in arts and humanities education. In the UK, we're seeing massive cuts to arts funding in local communities and in early years kind of education from birth all the ways up. So I wondered if you could reflect on, you know, what we need to do to foster this value of arts within STEM. So to think more about STEAM rather than STEM.
So just to say that, again, that's one of the reasons why I took the position that I took, was to try to generate more diversity and in both the content and the content creators. You know, I tell the story of how my very otherwise dry accountant came to my office one time and put on a headset and started using one of the 3D painting programs, where you have to walk around and actually paint in 3 dimensions. And he was so excited. So here's somebody who doesn't think of themselves as an artist and felt so passionate about creating. It's really a fundamental thing about what makes us human. And I don't know how we're going to shift around. Palmer Luckey has gone on to become a military weapons startup. We couldn't be at more diverse parts of the spectrum about what, you know, what we want to do with this potential technology. You know, I just think that it's a war, and we'll just have to keep trying to fight our battles and win them any way we can.
But I think also
to be military about it.
I think also there tends to be a gender-based difference in addressing STEM, and that is that men are more often to focus on maybe technology development or specialized problems, and women often get involved in technology because they have some artistic or social goal that they're trying to achieve. I mean, the number of women that I know who have started programming because it was a useful or necessary step to creating a work of art or creating, I mean, Noni's story is also, you know, she was not focused on creating the world's best VR headset. She had a problem she wanted to solve. She had an experience she wanted to convey, and that led to the development of this hardware. So I think that you know, if you're serious about STEM, if you're serious about getting women involved in STEM, then you have to look at what attracts women to STEM topics in the first place. And a lot of that is much more of a cultural and social reach, rather than saying, would you really like to learn the ins and outs of computer architecture? And there is a difference there. And I hear this from friends of mine who are tenured professors at the media lab at MIT. You know, it's on all levels.
Yes, other questions? We've got one here. Well, I might actually just get you to take the question at the back, and then we'll come to the question at the front. So, yes.
Hi, it's Andrea Gaudenzi from the Storytelling Institute at UAL. Thank you so much. It was a brilliant conversation. As I was listening to you, I was thinking, I read a lot about the female gaze in film studies and in photography, and I suddenly thought, what do we know about the female gaze in VR and immersive narratives? Is there anything around, written, researched, your point of views?
Well, I think we know very well what's going on in AI, right? So in terms of, you know, thinking about the difference of the gaze on females, you know, obviously the body swapping, et cetera, et cetera. But I just think I'd like to see this broadened a little bit, that it isn't just a female gaze, it's a diversity of gazes, a diversity of people. And I feel like that is incredibly important right now when we see the attacks on the trans community, that we really need to be thinking about the diverse views that the technologies are enabling for content creation. And I also think that, you know, given the fact that AIs also are great big liars, right? They're constantly, as I quote, I don't know if you know the term, that AI hallucinations. So AI will make stuff up, literally. Will make lots and lots. You'll say, like, what an Ani Della Pina's Award, and it'll say, you know, that I'm a MacArthur genius, which is this huge $250,000, whatever. These huge grants I've never gotten. So this requires the humanities people to go, you know I can read, I can write, I can see how bad this language is. Somebody was complaining about the word delve, that AI always uses the word delve. So when you talk about the female gaze, I mean, I think that you know, at this moment where the AI can basically create any image you want, it's really important that we have the curators involved in this moment. So that's the other thing, is don't think of the AI as a scary place. We need you. We need you right now. That's my take.
And then the other question is, what do you mean by the female gaze? I mean, I'm female, by the way, and I've made some work which is body-centered, but not much. And so I find, you know, when people are sort of out there looking for works that depict the female gaze, it's like, how come the female gaze is only about women looking at their own bodies, or women looking at sex from a different perspective? It's like, can't women look at other things beyond their own bodies and sex? If we do, does that mean that's no longer a female gaze? So, you know, so I've made a work about the Japanese American internment camps. I've made this piece that you'll see, by the way, in the Bush Arcade next to Nani's piece. It's also there, about this reverse Marco Polo gaze from a women's viewpoint. I've made a piece on the Berlin Wall, where it was two of us women working together, and we decided early on that this was not going to be an exciting how do I escape over the Berlin Wall piece. This was going to be a quiet encounter with the Berlin Wall, with the death strip, with the communities on both sides, and what are the consequences of living in those communities at the time of the wall. These are not spectacular things. These are not single-person shooters. It might be that those are the female gaze, but because they're not explicitly about the female body and about sex, then my work will never be shown in this context. So I think we need to have a better understanding of what the phrase the female gaze means.
So we can take a last question here, second row, from making you walk the full length, getting those steps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Kiran Hassan, and I'm from the Institute of Commonwealth Studies. Very interesting conversation. Noni, my question to you is that you raised the point of digital ethics. And we are aware that, AI is far more, not generous to females, and especially, with large, the big data is actually with the algorithm bias towards marginalized communities and especially women. So that's a real challenge. And so is there any political will to, with big tech companies and the governments to actually look into this issue whereby, how are women going to be faced, are going to be at the wrong end of the bargain when all this kind of VR programs are made much more in the kind of acceptable and normative in the public space. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's kind of teasing apart the one thing, which is, when you talk about AI, we talk about, my friend Robert Tursick said, you got to look at the house it was raised in, right? So when you have all the AI training models being trained on 100 years of bias, all this data that's going in there. I talk about this. I put a video of myself in a green screen, and I asked Runway AI to remove the green screen, and instead it returned this video where I'm washed in green and I was turned into a blonde, buxom babe, right? So, this video is unbelievable. So this is a real problem, right? And when we know that with OpenAI, the fight was about ethics, and they kicked the women off the board over the fight of ethics. I'm not so sure getting rid of Sam Altman was going to achieve the goals. So how from here do we take some of that data back? And I think that these are questions that aren't unique to us. And looking at the bias, I have a good friend who works very closely in AI and also looking at social networks, and she found she could actually look at run papers through AI, scientific papers, peer-reviewed papers, and very quickly the AI can say, oh, that paper's of a woman because it's from a lower journal, she's got less people who've supported it, she's got, like literally the AI can take two papers and show you why and where the biases exist. So that's the flip side of the coin, that the AI can find its own biases. And I think that's what we have to embrace. We have to try to think, how are we going to use these tools as a policing system, I guess, if that's the right term, as well. So that's my one goal on that. The other is, we are seeing, even though I know it's another helmet, another headset, but there has been a huge evolution about what you can do with your phone and the camera in your pocket. And the 3D modeling. And I think that what we really have to do is be really thinking about also the ethical production of this kind of content and what gets up to the top. So those are the two different problems, I think. One is how do we support diverse creators? And the other is, how can we use the AI to police itself? And those are my two thoughts on the answer to that question. I hope that's helpful.
Could you train your own AI little assistant that periodically during the day you could say, I'm sick of this shit, and it gives you a motivational address on gender equality? Would that be possible?
You have to pay for it. It's called OpenAI has a enterprise, and you can get ChatGPT Enterprise to write you a little thing that'll do that for you.
Okay.
And you don't even have to code it. You have to hire an engineer. You just tell what you want in some plain language.
When you say that the AI is responding about scientific papers saying it must be from a woman because it's a lower level journal and less people supporting, I do feel the need to have I don't want to go around the world swearing at people, so I could have that conversation with my own little AI, and it could do the motivational address back. Anyway, we can take that as an idea with us, but that has been a fascinating conversation, and more to come tomorrow when you can get let loose in the exhibition, as Sarah has described. But can you join me now in thanking this remarkable panel, Rico, Noni and Sarah. Thank you all. Thank you. I'm not exactly sure where, but someone will assist you to get there. Feel free to stay and continue to have a social discussion, and the artists whose work is on display tomorrow, as well as this wonderful panel, will be there as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.